could have a moment, well, more than a moment, because we're going to start the program. You ready, Richie? Okay. So, in case you don't know me, my name is Mary Ann Savakinas. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, good. And I'm the director of the Historical Society, and I'm very pleased to see such a nice crowd tonight, and grateful to everyone coming out on a rainy night to talk Lackawanna County history. So, welcome to the 2023 annual dinner. I want to thank the folks at the Radisson for their superb service tonight and wonderful meal. I also want to commend them. Commend them for their fine work on keeping one of our local treasures here and usable. Thank you, Bernie, yes. And our general manager was here before. I don't know if Tara is still here, but Tara Lishneski is the general manager, and tonight's hostess is Anna. I don't know if she's still out here. She ran out to get more dessert, but they have a great staff, and they're really working hard to bring us a beautiful evening. So again, thanks to the Radisson. I also want to thank our trustees who Michael asked to stand up earlier. Just in case you want to know who those faces were you're looking at, I'm going to give you their names just so you know. Starting with our president, Michael Gilmartin. And everyone knows Michael is just a wonderful person who works really hard and goes above and beyond to serve many organizations, including the Lackawanna Historical Society, right down to those centerpieces he told you to take home tonight. This way? Can you hear me now without the ba-ba-ba? Okay. Thank you, Rich. And Michael leads the Historical Society and helps us to thrive, and I cannot thank him enough for his continued willingness to share his time and his talent. Thank you, Michael. And his fellow trustees who are here tonight, who stood up earlier, but I'll just run through their names so you know who they are. Joe Cimini, Tom Cipriano, Bill Conlog, Doug Forer, Don Fredrickson, Richard Leonori, Linda Lynette, Lenny Piesky, Chris Posley, Ella Rayburn, Bill Rinaldi, Elaine Shepard, and Delita Walton, and Jeff, I didn't know you were coming until yesterday, so Jeff Kiefer also. So those are our trustees, and we're glad they're here with us tonight. And our trustees are volunteers, and they serve us in many ways on programs and contributing to different fundraisers and just being there to help us guide our policies. But they're not alone. We have so many volunteers and members who are active and participate in our programs and offer generous financial support whenever we ask, and share their love of history with us by sharing their knowledge and their research. And all of these people help us to continue our mission to inspire the exploration of Lackawanna County history. So thanks to everyone, our members, our volunteers, our trustees. And with that in mind, I want to take a moment to recognize the 2023 Volunteer of the Year. Every year at our annual dinner, we try to recognize someone who we feel goes above and beyond in their service. And so I want to tell you about tonight's honoree. I first met her in the summer of 2020 when she expressed an interest in volunteering at the Historical Society. Summer 2020. We met on the front porch of the Catlin House for obvious reasons, and we talked about her interests, and I learned a lot about her experience, which was, to say the least, very impressive. She worked for several years as an exhibit designer, a drafter, and a production manager for a company called Christopher Chadburn and Associates, and later as an independent consultant to digitally document and coordinate a variety of museum exhibit design projects and provide additional collections management services. She also brought vast library experiences through her time with the Backstage Library Works at the Peabody Essex Museum and as an intern for Golston and Storrs Law Library. Her years of experience is what first brought her to Scranton when she signed on as a cataloging assistant at the University of Scranton's Weinberg Library in 2016. 3 years later, she became an associate professor and cataloging and metadata librarian. And as I said, her experience is very impressive. And I was so happy that she wanted to share her knowledge with us. At the time, it couldn't have been more perfect because the Historical Society had just accepted the Guy Cali photograph collection. I'm sure many of your faces are in this collection because, as you all know, Guy Cali took everybody's high school photo and wedding photo. So we took these photos in right in the middle of COVID, and we had no idea what we were going to do with them. And after our meeting on the COVID cautious front porch, tonight's honoree has been invaluable at assisting us in maintaining that project and setting up a database for it and processing the collection. She is a true professional and as a volunteer provides our organization with expert guidance, not just for the projects that I mentioned, but also by assisting in other issues that come up, adding, suggesting, advising, and giving us possible solutions for things like how to deal with the Jenkins archive, or what to do with the digital library holdings. Where should we put things like the audios and the videos? She's always solving problems for us, and as it's priceless. Her input is priceless, and I am so pleased to present this year's 2023 Volunteer of the Year, Marlene Cloutier. And just one more thing. I know Sarah is going to ask all of the speakers to come up, but I have to thank our dedicated staff first. Olivia Bernardi and Sarah Pacini are the backbone and the brains and the heart and the soul of the Lackawanna Historical Society. Olivia is our creative director. She's the one who makes the magic happen on our website with any of our virtual programs and our printed materials, like the dinner invitation. I don't know if you all took a look at the program cover, but that was Sarah's suggestion. I have an idea, and Olivia's magic that she managed to put a map of Lackawanna County together and put on little figures to represent our speakers. So they're always doing things like that. They're just clever and creative, and I feel so fortunate to work with them every day. And then Sarah is our assistant director and tonight's program moderator. She holds a master's degree in history from the University of Scranton. She has more than 15 years experience in working for nonprofit organizations. And in 2010, she wrote the book Framing Faith, A Pictorial History of the Communities of Faith. And in 2017, she authored the Story of Scranton Curriculum Guide for the Scranton School District. As the assistant director at the Lackawanna Historical Society, Sarah stays busy. She plans and presents a variety of public programs to local social and civic groups. She answers history inquiries. She assists on-site researchers. She installs intriguing exhibits and maintains a tremendously successful social media presence. She also hosts our monthly pastimes, if you ever tune into our Zoom program once a month. And she takes a lead in planning many of our activities and special events, like tonight's dinner. This was all Sarah tonight. And I want to thank Sarah for that. And I also am going to turn the program over to her. But first, please join me in recognizing Sarah's 10th year at the Lackawanna Historical Society. Turn the program over to her.
All right, everyone, once again, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Mary Ann, for that lovely introduction and prizes. This evening, we're celebrating the 145th anniversary of Lackawanna County. On August 13th, Lackawanna County was 145 years old. Our program tonight is to explore the land, the people, and the industrial history of Lackawanna County with three of our favorite experts and storytellers. Willis Conover, who is actually one of my professors at the university, who is showing his professional skills. He brought note cards, so he's ready to go. Our friend Ted Baird is an archaeologist and lives in Moscow. He's our expert in that region of Lackawanna County. And Bernie McGurl, who is Old Man River, basically. The longtime director of the Lackawanna River Conservation Association. So I'm going to ask each of you briefly to just kind of introduce yourselves, give us a little bit of what your thesis statement is on Lackawanna County. Ted, I'm going to actually start with you. Since Ted has the archaeological background, Ted's experience goes back the farthest. We were talking over dinner about discoveries in Coxton Yards that can date back to 9,000 years in Lackawanna County. So we're only looking at a very small fraction of the history of the county. So Ted, we'll start with you, please.
Yes, my name is Ted Baird, and I'm the treasurer of the local chapter of the Society for Pennsylvania Archaeology, the Frances Dorrance chapter. Frances, female Frances, so if you want to look it up on YouTube, we have quite a bit of stuff up on that. Been digging down at Coxton Yards for upward to 25 or so years. Got involved in it because my daughter was interested in archaeology, and a friend of my wife's that she knew from the library said that there was a group that did it. And we took my daughter to a meeting, and she was bored stiff, and I couldn't get enough of it. So I started going down to the dig. Finding the first point, finding the first stone drill was enough to capture me, and I've been going practically every Sunday for 25 years, except in the winter time. You can't dig in the winter, but you can do paperwork in the winter, and there's a lot of paperwork involved. I was also involved with the Covington Township Bicentennial. We had a celebration a couple of years back because it was the 200th anniversary of Covington Township, which is in North Pocono, for those of you that don't know where Covington Township is.
No, they probably don't.
It's on the other end of the county. It's up in the hills. And I did that. I got interested in that because of G. Ellis Miller. I don't know if anybody remembers G. Ellis Miller. He wrote local history articles for the Villager. He was a fascinating man, and when I was a teenager, I was reading his articles when I'd come up to visit my grandparents, and I found out that things existed before I did. And it really, really fascinated me, and that just got me involved in anything, especially with the North Pocono history, because it's so tied in with all the branches of my family, as is Scranton.
Very good. Ted usually has some of our favorite genealogy stories as well. Is it your wife's uncle?
My wife's great uncle killed Babe Ruth's father.
We didn't say they were good stories or happy stories. They're just interesting stories. So, yeah.
But my wife wants me to point out that he was a great uncle by marriage. He was defending his sister's honor. One of his brother-in-laws ran off with a 16-year-old girl, and he confronted his brother-in-law and was in a fight with him in the cigar store across the street from the Ruth Bar in Baltimore City. Now, this guy's other sister was married to Babe Ruth's father, and he came over to break up the fight. He got involved in the fight, got knocked down, hit his head, and it killed him. So I love to say that my wife's family killed Babe Ruth's father.
Willis, I'll turn it over to you now if you could introduce yourself briefly. Some of you, I think, have copies of Willis's most recent book, Labeling Lackawanna. We do have more if you don't. We are prepared for all eventualities.
That's right. I brought my pen with me, so I'll be happy to sign. Thank you. Sarah's a former student of mine, so I always get.
I survived. It was fine.
Yeah, and she survived. That's true. As Mary Ann pointed out, Lackawanna County was born in August of 1878 when we finally managed to break away from those other folks down the line in what Sarah and I were discussing as Hyphenville. Maybe some of you have heard that.
And we're hoping someone could back this up.
Yeah,
Perhaps Rich is in your family history of John Jenkins calling it Hyphenville.
Right. Anyway, so that was in 1878, of course. In 1978, 100 years later, in August, I arrived in Lackawanna County and took a job over the expressway here and at the university. And I ended up staying here for 41 years. I taught U.S. history and geography, and actually my most popular course was History of the American West. And that's reflected in some of the things that I've done for the journal, and maybe some of you have read those things. As I got settled in, I decided to walk out of my office in St. Thomas Hall and walk the few yards it was to the Catlin House and to check it out. And that's when I got involved, and I ended up bringing students over, and including one group of students who we were assigned to catalog old maps that the society owned, and many of them were housed down in the basement. So we used to spend lots of time down in the basement after brushing off all the cobwebs and everything else, and enjoying the squirrels that would scatter, run through the basement. Yeah,
You chased them into the attic now. So
now they're in the attic, yes, they're in the attic. Yeah. We all have that problem, yeah. Anyway, so that's how I got involved, and as time went on, I wrote a couple articles, and you'll notice that two of them, at least, linked my interest in the American West with Lackawanna County, which is a bit of a stretch when you think about it, but I managed to do it. I did, the one I really enjoyed was the Buffalo Bill Wild West show, and its frequent stops in Scranton. And I did some research actually out in Cody, Wyoming, to sort of fill in for what that part of it. And I still am looking for photographs. So if you have any photographs in your collections in your attic that the squirrels haven't gotten to, that might show the Wild West, Buffalo Bill's Wild West in Scranton, I'd really appreciate knowing. I went through the archives out in Cody and they didn't have any. But anyway, that one, and then I did the one on the Irish immigrants who were enticed to homestead in north central Nebraska. And I visited the town of O'Neill, Nebraska, which claims to be Nebraska's Irish capital. And they just really loved, the Irish thing there. And I found a large number really, of Northeast Pennsylvania Irish who were enticed to go out there and homestead and managed to survive in many cases. So that's kind of my interest in how I came about it. When in teaching a course in cultural geography, I got into the place name interest. And place names, I've found, really do express history of places. The reasons, every place name has a story to tell. And that's what led to a long and frustrating at times work to produce the book. I'm happy that some of you talked to me tonight and said how much you enjoyed it, and it really makes me feel good about that, and all that long ordeal is worthwhile. In 2019, I decided to retire from the university fully and move back to my hometown of Gettysburg. And I now live there, and I still do research and writing. I promised Mary Ann an article on Scranton miners who found their way to Butte, Montana. So I'm working on that, and now that I've publicly announced that, I guess I'm sort of even, that'll be the little
You're
kick that I
committed
needed.
now,
Yeah, right.
Wanted to,
Okay.
yep.
So that's it.
We're going to come looking for it.
Exactly. I fill some of my time, I'm a volunteer with the National Park Service in Gettysburg, and I work at the Museum and Visitor Center. If you've been to Gettysburg and have been on the battlefield, you probably have come into our building. And I work the information desk, so I get a chance to meet everybody and tell them what's available. And it's been real rewarding. I enjoy that very much. So, thank you.
Very good, thank you. All right, if we could pass the mic down. Last but not least, Bernie. I know you have a theory of everything, so.
Yeah, well, thanks. I'm really honored to be on the program with these two distinguished gentlemen. And I'm Bernie McGurl, and I was born in Scranton a few years ago. And I'll just let you gauge my age. I was on the last Scranton Transit trolley car in December 1954, and I was a little bit bigger than a rugrat. So I've been around the block. I was fortunate to have two very brilliant parents. My dad was a professor of literature at the University of Scranton, and he was also a local historian and a member of the board of the Lackawanna Historical Society. And he would occasionally go down to the Catlin House on Saturdays in the mid to late 1950s and early 1960s to work on programs with some of the other directors and the staff. And he was also wrote and edited the newsletter for a few years. So I would accompany him as a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old kid. And I just had to run a lecture. You might find my fingerprints on some of those old maps.
Yeah, you probably.
I'd wander the whole of the Catlin House and just you know, brought it all in, pulled books off the shelf of the library and read them. And
Great.
And so I think I had a rather unique childhood in that respect, and to understand the people in the community and what happened here, how it happened, who was involved, and how it transpired over the generations from the Native American population and into the colonial period and the settlement and the Connecticut Yankees and the Pennamites and through the establishment of the coal and iron industry and on through the 20th century. I think my theory of everything is that we need to understand who we are, where we've come from, so that we can build a better future for the future for generations. And that's one of my loves of history, is learning that and sharing that with as many people as I can. So, thanks.
To kick off our discussion, as we said, the county is officially 145 years old, but as we've alluded to, the story actually started much earlier, begins before that. The poet Robert Frost wrote, "The land was ours before we were the land's, possessing what we were still unpossessed by." The earliest Yankee settlers arrived from Connecticut and points north more than 80 years ago. Some of them were related to our friend Rich Jenkins here. Thank you. The history is agricultural and industrial. It was both shaped by and exploiting the natural resources that are in the area. To me, when I was thinking of this, it kind of started a chicken or the egg kind of question. Are the land or the people more important? To what extent did the landscape influence the nomenclature? So whoever wants to start off on that one. I had a softball. I thought I'd go with that one. So,
Quite honestly, I think the land is more important, because if it wasn't as rich in resources, and if the, I hate to say this, but if the Wyoming Valley wasn't so rich for agriculture, the people wouldn't have come here. The people wouldn't come here unless there's something for the people to do, something for the people to have, something for the people to work with. And that is my view of the chicken and the egg thing. By the way, the egg came first because the chickens came from dinosaurs who were already laying eggs.
got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so there's one vote for the land.
Yeah.
Well,
Bernie?
I'll vote for the land as well. I think the mountains, the geology that had the coal here, the geology that left the fertile glacial topsoil in the Wyoming Valley. I don't know that we'd be as popular a place if it was just all woods like out in Williamsport and in the Central Mountains, heavy duty forests. I think the thing that really brought people here, the Europeans, was the understanding that Native Americans were farming along the Susquehanna River, and that I think was the initial impetus. And I think too, I'd just like to make a comment, a political comment, if I may, on Frost's beautiful poem. And you know, we were the land before the land was us, and you know, just ask the question, you know, who is we? Who is the we he's speaking of? It's the American people, but is it the New England version, the American version, going back to the pilgrims of the Europeans that came here to become Americans, versus the native people who were here prior to that? And so I think that, you know, it asks a good question. It's a profound statement, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And one would ask that of the native people as well. They came here. Everyone in North America is an immigrant. The human species rose in the Old World, in the European, African, Asian continent, and somehow got across the ocean at some point in time, ice ages or whatnot, going back 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years, and there's a debate on when humans first arrived in North America. But the culture that was here, the variety, the massive numbers of cultural perspectives of Aboriginal people who lived in North America and South America is just fascinating, and a whole story on its own right. But so I think the land formed, shaped those peoples as well in many ways, and certainly as our ancestors settled here from Europe and Africa and Asia in contemporary times. It was the minerals that really set us off, and we became virtually the Saudi Arabia of the late 19th century with the coal that we produced here. So phenomenal impact on the world, technology, engineering, industrial organizations, et cetera. So yeah, so I'll go with the land.
Okay, all right.
Geez, it's 2-0.
2-0. Are you going with the
Guess
team,
where
or are you
I'm
gonna
gonna
be the
go.
outlier here?
Well, no, I certainly, the natural resources that were here brought people here. But, and the Frost poem that you say is a very patriotic poem, and is one with the land and the bonding. And it's not everywhere that you have natural resources that can be exploited and bring wealth to people who go and exploit them. And that happened here, but I think, and I'm stealing some of the thunder of Bert Folsom from his book, where he talks about a number of the people that came to this valley, certainly the Scrantons, not all of them, but some of them, and others who we honored with town names, obviously, were special in that they did become one with the land. They not only were interested in coming here and exploiting it and making money, obviously, but once they got here, they really did bond with this region. And I think that made it sort of special in many ways. And so I'm not an environmental determinist to the point where I'm saying that the land shaped these people, but certainly it impacted them. And so I think there's a combination, and so I'll just, go both.
Kind of gonna waffle.
Yeah. That's simple.
All right,
And one other point is that this is what, and they made it, those people who came in early on and set things up made it possible for others to come here and succeed. That's not what happened down the line. That didn't happen in Wilkes-Barre.
Which is why Lackawanna County is a separate county.
Exactly. Well, it took a while, but that's basically it. You're right. And they were, I'm going into the Connecticut people versus the Pennsylvania people and so on. But Wilkes-Barre wasn't interested in that. They were interested in keeping the land the way it was, farm it and get what they needed from it, and weren't interested in accepting large number of development and so forth. We have that theory. We still have people who believe that in Pennsylvania today. I live in a small county, Adams County. We don't have 1 million people, but and there are. I live in a township where the township supervisors keep turning down proposals for development. We don't even have a super Walmart. Really? Yeah. So I think there's a unique story here that maybe we don't appreciate as residents all the time, and I think it's one that should be told more.
Well, that was a great softball lead into my next question. Thank you. To how do we explore those stories? It seems like we all agree that the land shaped the people who came here, gave them a reason to stay, whether it was agricultural or industrial. But especially the earlier stories, the native stories, the indigenous stories, the earlier industrial history. There was at one point 110 coal breakers in Lackawanna County. There are none anymore. So how do we tell those stories that are of a vanished people, a vanished industry? How do we bring them back and tell those stories with what remains today?
Well, we're doing it.
Yeah, what we're doing right
tonight.
here.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to talk about it. You have to tell people about it. Our group, we've, as I said, we've been digging there for 25 years, but we have an open house every year in hopes of getting more people and younger people interested in doing it. We have succeeded, and we do have some younger members now. And matter of fact, the open house is going to be the day before Columbus Day. No, which is the one at the end of this month? No, October, end of October. End of October.
It's Halloween.
No. What is that? Is it Veterans Day? Is that Veterans Day?
That's the first week.
No,
That's
okay.
That's in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
But well, it's the beginning of October.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, whatever that is.
October-ish at some point.
October-ish. We have an open house coming up where anybody can come down, anybody can dig. And as I said, finding stuff in the soil that has been there for thousands of years sort of wakes you up to the possibilities of history. Another thing that I find is important for me, because I do genealogy. If you do genealogy, it makes history real. You have your family, you know who your family is, you know what they did. And if you can connect them to some important thing in history, it makes that history real. And the more people that understand that, the better, because then they're passing on history to the next generation. Sadly, a lot of stuff disappears before it's appreciated. And I understand, you can't keep every old building, even though I'd like to. You can't keep every old anything, but you should at least record what you get. And this is something that I have, Lackawanna County should be doing. The State Museum has a program called PASS, Pennsylvania Site Survey. And what it does is record archaeological sites. Lackawanna County has about 70-some recorded sites. About half of them are prehistoric, the other half are historic. The site that I've been working at for 25 years in Luzerne County is the 169th site of Luzerne County. Lackawanna has to start recording more of these sites. The site, if somebody knows, you know, where there's an Indian rock shelter, somebody finds items along the Lackawanna River, they should be reporting it to the state so the state knows where these resources are. Just recently, just this summer, a young man was walking with his daughter along the Lackawanna River at Sweeney Beach, and he found a piece of stone about this long, about this wide, about that thick, and it had a design on it. It ends up in downtown Scranton. A Indian artifact can still be found, and they still can be found, but they're not as easy to find anymore because of development and such, especially in the valley. But they are there, and they have to be passed on. Now, where he found it is very close to Capouse Meadows, and we know there's a recorded site there. But there's so many other parts of the county that are underreported. I don't know of any Native American site in Covington Township. There's some in Springbrook, there's some in Roaring Brook on the out towards Wayne County, farms where people find these things, but people aren't finding them in Lackawanna County or not reporting them in Lackawanna County.
We occasionally get people who come to the Catlin House with a very nice rock that they found, and we usually pass them on to Ted. So we're looking, we're trying to find some. We're trying to find some for you. So Bernie or Willis, do you have anything to add about telling those stories of vanished peoples and industries?
I think we've always looked at the river as a metaphor and as a meme to tell the story of the community. It's what binds us. It flows through the community. Water itself is a carrier of messages. It tells everyone downstream what's going on upstream. And the program that we've been collaborating with the community on over the last 36 years has led to the development in partnership, in many cases, with the Lackawanna Heritage Valley Authority to implement the joint plan of the Lackawanna River Conservation Association, our master plan for the river. Many of the elements of that plan are included in the plan for the Lackawanna Heritage Valley. So we've been working closely together with the authority from the get-go, and a lot of the folks that were in the inception of the LRCA were also involved in the inception of the Heritage Program. So we've acquired land along the river. We have about 30 acres right near the archaeological dig at Coxton. Unfortunately, that was a topsoil pit, and so a lot of the good artifacts were probably dug out, but we've opened it to the Frances Dorrance chapter to get in there at any time they so choose. And there's an adjacent 66-acre site that is owned by Waste Management that we're collectively managing with them. So up the river through the lower valley, we've acquired properties in Old Forge. We've got about 4,000 feet of riverfront in Old Forge by the Old Forge Colliery, right across from the confluence of Springbrook Creek. We own a Superfund site there, the old Lehigh Electric site. And if you dig there, you're going to find PCBs before we find native artifacts. And then further up in Taylor, we've got the old Southworks slag pile. So if we're looking for any remnants of the huge steel furnaces that were on the Scranton side of the river, they dumped the slag on the Taylor side of the river, right along the Heritage Trail. Up in Scranton itself, we've got Sweeney's Beach that we've developed with the city. And again, that's right across from where the Capouse Meadows Native American village site was. And the villages moved around. They lived on different sides of the river, so it's very likely that there were campfires and wickiups and teepees and longhouses over on that Sweeney's Beach area as well. Then further up the valley, we've got a mile of Ontario Western Railroad through North Scranton. We've got several folks that have said, oh, Kapous is buried up there. But we're still trying to find valid proof of that. I think Hollister said Kapous was probably buried up on the Tripp Farm. There were artifacts found up there in 1803 reading an inventory of those artifacts that I think were eventually transferred down to the Wyoming Valley Historical Society, that sounded like it could have been Kapous's grave. Some of the grave goods that were associated with that were mid 18th century. But further up the valley, we've got a mile of the Pennsylvania Coal Company Gravity Railroad that we've acquired on Music Mountain above Tige Street, and that's definitely an archaeological site. We had PennDOT fund a lot of archaeological exploration there during the construction of the KC Highway. There were lots of impacts to both the Pennsylvania and D&H gravity railroads by the highway construction all the way up the valley through Carbondale. We have several other properties. The Powder Mill Dam property up in German, the former Music Powder Works. So we've been working to acquire these sites and get them protected, get them integrated into the Heritage Trail where we can. We're looking at replicating that process up along Roaring Brook and into Covington Township. We just completed a big plan for Roaring Brook that's posted on our website, and we have another plan for Leggett's Creek that looks at how we can try to get a trail through the notch, and that's going to be a big challenge. So that's going to be something I think for the next generation to do. So we're looking at what we can do today to set a set piece for the future and set some challenges on how can we follow through on what we've accomplished so far. We have an interesting project. I won't really talk about it, but if it gets funded, and if any of you are talking to your state legislators, tell them that we really need to fund the proposal of the LRCA, which the Lackawanna Historic Society is going to be a major partner with on a historic building acquisition. And if we can preserve buildings that are really important to be preserved, like this one, I think that needs to be part of our mission as well. So there's a lot of things going on, and hopefully we'll hear some good news later this year if they get the budget straightened out in Harrisburg.
So stay tuned for more on that. So the process is ongoing of collecting and telling those stories. Willis, do you have anything to add about speaking for the people? Since you were advocating for the importance of people, do you have anything to add to that?
I think I'm good.
You're good?
I'm good.
Okay, all right. All right, this is a question maybe more specifically for you directly almost. There's a lot of histories are embedded in the places, in the names that are on the land. If we talk about going up the line or down the line today, you're following the line of the D&H. The D&H kind of perfectly encapsulates, or the line encapsulates the history of the D&H. The towns are generally named for whoever happened to be president of the railroad at the time. You got a town named for you, so you won a prize. So there's a good industrial history encapsulated in those towns along the river. What else? What other stories, or what really good stories are encapsulated in the names that we're left with today?
Well, there's, as I said before, every place name has a story, and some are, reflect the physical naming. Roaring Brook, all right. And Native Americans tended to use physical descriptions for their names as well, name their place names as well. Here in Lackawanna County, there's a couple patterns. One, as you mentioned, as you go up the line, actually you can start at Taylor, and you go Taylor, Scranton, I'm going to look at this, Archbald, Dixon City, Troop, German, Jessup, Oliphant, Winton, Childs, Simpson, Vanling. All of those are names of prominent, movers and shakers, developers and so forth. So obviously somebody believed that they were those people warranted a place, a name, their name attached to a particular place. But you didn't have to be, involved in industry and business at that time. Those came later on. You had early settlers. We always name places for early settlers. We always name places like, Kaiser Valley from Keys, Ransom, Scott, Baylors, all we use local early settlers and so forth. We used to get a lot of that on when Pennsylvania used those old blue and orange or blue and yellow, whatever they were, signs when you went into a town, a borough, and it said the name of the town, and it was named for. They used to tell you the origin of the name of the town. And a lot of times it was, in fact, for Gettysburg, it says, James Getty's early settler. And that's what a lot of them were. We've lost those. A lot of those signs are down. They're not being replaced, certainly. Now you're looking for an interesting name.
I am, all right?
Okay. Well, some of the more interesting ones are the post office officials named a lot of places. Because whenever it was determined that a community needed a post office, they had to have a name for it. And the name didn't always match what village name might have been used and so on. So you get, for example, out in South Abington Township, Adela, well, that's Ed and Ella. Ed and Ella were his name was Truman, first of all, a Clark, and you got a lot of Clarks in Abington areas. But Ed Clark was the postmaster, was appointed postmaster, had to come up with a name. His wife's name was Ella, so they put it together, and that's why we have Adela. You've heard of Adela Road. There's not much of a town there as such. Women played a major role in suggesting names that were literary links. That's where you get La Plume, for example, let me look at my notes here. I got so many. Glenburn and Waverly, suggested by women writers who lived in those areas, and they reflect oftentimes the French thing, the nom de plume, the name, your pen name, or the Waverly novels, which were very popular in Sir Walter Scott in the 19th century. People read those books, and whenever they were looking for a name, hey, there you go, let's use that. And so that's what we have, some of them there. I found, you get sections of towns and so forth, like the Nebraska section up at Archibald. Well, that's linked, that's what got me going on my Nebraska settlers thing. I don't know quite how that worked out, if it was these were returning failed homesteaders who brought the name Nebraska back, which doesn't really make sense. Or it was some people from that region went out to homestead, and those that were left called the place Nebraska, the Nebraska section. And there's even a Patagonia, there's a section, in Scranton, near Hyde Park area. And that does reflect people, actually Welsh, interestingly enough, who went to Argentina, were lured there to mine, work in the mines and so forth, and came back, or they came from that area, or they returned to that area and brought the Patagonia name with them. It's intriguing how some of these names come about. And as I said, everyone has a story. I can't go into all of them. I have 536 in the book.
See his published works for more. But you mentioned that
We'll have to keep the bar open a little bit longer.
Well, you said the importance of postmasters. We have the postmaster to thank for one of our favorite naming stories ever. Chinchilla, again, in the Abingtons, the source of so many weird things. If they haven't, I'm going to tell them because I love it. When Chinchilla was established, the postmaster's wife had a chinchilla fur coat that she was very proud of. And, what else do we name our new little village or place where we live? Honey, let's name it after your coat. So we are stuck with Chinchilla because of a long dead postmaster's wife's coat.
Right, but they weren't happy with that. And it's interesting because
I can imagine why they weren't happy with that story.
around World War I era and so forth, they changed the name to Pershing to honor Blackjack Pershing, the Pershing and so on. And then around 1914 or so, they would switch back. And that prompted, and it went back to chinchilla. And the Scranton newspaper at the time wrote an editorial or something saying, this is terrible. Why they picked that name? They should name it for one of the pioneers, Leggett or Leach, one of those. That would be better. We don't like this name. And you have discussions over a lot of these names a lot of times. Some just are applied and just stick. And there are times with people, well, the Scrantons didn't want to call their town Scranton. No, they want to call it Harrison in honor of the president.
William Henry Harrison,
And
which they misspelled, by the way.
But
they tried.
Yeah, but and people refuse to accept that. Just no, we're not going to do that. And so that's the kind of thing, and the process that goes on. So much of that, unfortunately, is lost in history. We don't know all the debate and discussions and so forth, particularly when you get back into the early part of the 1800s or so. But every community has a name, and I found that a lot of us never think about that. We grow up in places, say, where are you from? Oh, I'm from whatever. And just, where'd that come from? Where'd that name come from? Well, I don't know. And that's what I found out of my students. So that developed a class assignment for my cultural geography students that they had to research the origin of the name of their hometown. And some of them, I never knew that. And in the process, they learned the history of their hometown. And ran across members of their own families or whatever if they had been there for a while. So that worked out.
Okay. So these are things to think of if you ever have the chance to name something. You could name it after yourself or a feature or a really nice piece of clothing that you have in your closet. Helps to be the postmaster as well. Bernie or Ted, do you have a favorite story for a place to share?
When we were talking about doing this, you had mentioned the lack of Native American names
Right,
in
yes.
Lackawanna County. And we do have a few, Kapouse Meadows, and that was named after Chief Kapouse. We have Manuka, which I was looking up on the internet, maybe you can correct me. It was supposedly named after a guy's niece who had a friend, an Indian friend named Manuka, but I have a feeling it was a story in a book that she had been reading, some novel or something. That doesn't make much sense to me. Another one is Moosic, and they say because of the moose. I had heard that, but I read another place where it said because of the elk.
Yeah, it's elk.
But to me, elk makes sense
Elk
because
must make sense.
Native Americans like to describe things. And their name for a big deer-like thing with huge antlers was probably moose.
Right.
And, it probably just means that big deer-like thing that has the antlers. And
Music is much more concise than big deer-like thing.
yeah, we aren't, they had very flowery speech. They liked to name things like Tobyhanna means, I think, dark waters and, different things like that. By the way, Roaring Brook, you said that makes sense. It was, in the original maps, it was shown as Gully Creek. Gully Creek.
There is that still there.
Yeah. But there's also...
I thought you were going for Naog.
I'm going to. That's one of my pet things. Naog, I remember as a kid reading that Naog was a local Indian name, and when I was doing my family tree stuff, and I saw that my 8th great-grandfather in Connecticut was left a feather bed at Naog. I said, how on earth did that, this wasn't developed, how could that happen? Well, a couple of years ago, I went to Naog Meadows in Glastonbury, Connecticut. It's a local Indian name, but it's a local Indian name there. And I happened to be digging, the family still owns the farm, and I was digging there, and the farmer came and says, oh, you're the one that's from around Scranton. He says, I went to visit your Naog. He says, do you want to see the other Naog? And he told me how to get there. And I tell you, it looks like our Naog. It's very, very similar. It's no wonder that they transferred the name from Connecticut
Right.
to here.
Yeah.
And by the way, the area, the creek that runs through Naog Meadows is Roaring Brook.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it was, I do side with the Connecticut people in the Connecticut Pennamite thing. Yeah. But another thing about some names, some of the names got changed because they sounded better. Thornhurst was originally Briar Patch. Means the same thing. It means the same thing, but it sounds better. Yeah. Elmhurst was originally Dunnings.
Dunnings, yeah.
But Elmhurst has a better appeal to the
It
ear.
looks better on a postcard.
It looks better. It looks better as an address if you're a rich Scranton businessman that
That's
wants a summer
developing, yeah.
that's developing the area up there.
And planting
yeah.
thousands of elm trees,
Yes. Yeah.
which he did, yeah.
Yeah. So you know you get all those name changes. Daleville, named by the postmaster for his father. It was originally Yorktown because all the people that moved there were originally from York, England. You know, the Wardells and the Dales came over together. They were from Yorkshire, and it was originally called Yorktown.
You're doing Moscow?
Well, yeah, Moscow too. Yeah, that's another one. Those blue and yellow plaques used to say, named because of the numerous Russian immigrants that settled here. No. If you look at the census records, there were no Eastern Europeans in Moscow when it was named. The guy I'm trying to think, Leander Griffith, was a store owner there. It didn't have a name. It was a wide spot in the road. He went to Philadelphia to get supplies, and he ordered some supplies, and he said, the guy selling them the supplies says, well, where should I send it? He says, well, it doesn't have a name. He described where it was, and he says, well, it has to have a name or I can't send it. It says, you got to call it something, even if it's Moscow after the place with the big bell. Which, to me, sounded sort of like a dopey story, which makes it sound more true. But if you look at old newspapers, the largest bell ever cast in the world was at Saint such and such in Moscow, Russia, and it fell after a fire, and it was like used as a filler piece. You know, if they needed just a little bit more space to be used up to fill the column, it was always thrown in the newspaper. So everybody knew what the big bell in Moscow. So
These stories that we tell are always important, even if they don't seem like they are. So that's good to know. Good to know. You may inspire something. Bernie, did you have anything else to add there?
Well, let's talk about the name Lackawanna.
Sure.
I mean, it's commonly referred to as the stream that forks, and it's Algonquin origin. And I'm thinking, Native Americans like Naog, which could be translated into roaring waters, and the stream that forks, Lackawanna. I sort of think that the Lackawanna, the Lackawaxen, and the Lehigh are all from the same root,
right.
and all of them, when the European settler was with the Native American, what do you call that creek over there? Oh, it's Lacu. It's a stream that forks. So I think the generic names of the Native American use of generic terms, they weren't always fancied, that they just said, but that's what it is. So I think there's a commonality in those three rivers and streams, and I also have a theory about the Lackawanna Creek. It was referred to as a creek in colonial times, but by the 1820s it was a river. Well, what changed?
How did it get promoted?
I think the settlers that wanted to promote canals and navigation had something to do with it, because rivers were considered navigable waters, not necessarily creeks.
Right.
So by becoming the Lackawaxen Creek, becoming the Lackawaxen River, the Lackawanna Creek becoming the Lackawanna River, I think it helped to promote have that color of law in establishing navigation. Just a couple of thoughts on that place.
Names serve a practical purpose.
Yeah.
Too, rather than, sometimes they have to tell you what direction you're going in rather than tell a nice story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
well, with the Native American, when you don't have a written language, and to the European American ear, that's why we have so many different spellings with these
Yeah.
that finally somebody decides they're going to spell it a certain way, like the way Lackawanna finally ended up, and we've been using it ever since, and so on. But how did it sound to the American white settler ear, and then how it was recorded? That's right.
I sort of like how Dunmore got its name.
Yeah.
It's just trying to get money out of
That's
an
right.
English nobleman.
Exactly.
Just
And he
rename
never
it.
came through.
He
right?
never came through,
No.
yeah.
They weren't always successful.
So it should
but
still
they
be Bucktown.
tried. If you go to there on a Friday night during football season, it is still Bucktown. So it depends on when you're there, I think. Yes. But speaking of the river, let's close with the river and kind of bring our story forward again. For decades, the river has been kind of an indicator of industry. It was icky and polluted and gross. Sometimes, depending on where you are, it's a very nice shade of bright orange. But today, the river has been substantially improved, largely thanks to Bernie, and it acts as an anchor for a new industry, for recreation and for tourism. How can we use this improvement and this story to continue to tell the story of Lackawanna County and what comes next?
Well, I'd like to just offer a couple of quotes. I think the people that came here and interacted with the environment at different periods of time. I've got a quote from Hollister's History of the Lackawanna Valley on the front of our membership brochure for the LRCA, and I'll just read it. So this is Hollister's recollection from the 1870s of the river when he was a child in the 18 teens and 20s. The Lackawanna takes its name from the Indian tongue and signifies the meeting of two streams, once abounding in fish of every variety, particularly known for its brook trout, gliding silently by over the gravelly bars, dancing in the sunshine, a river of the purest spring water. Along its banks, thick with hemlock, oak, and pine, where deer and moose wandered among the groves of rhododendron and laurel. So that was a picture of the river in the 19th century. And then in the mid-20th century, Scranton was fortunate to have a fellow named W.S. Merwin, who was the Poet Laureate of the United States for a while and Pulitzer Prize winner, and really interesting man, who spent his teenage years here growing up in Scranton, and then went on to be a famous writer all over the world, and lived in Maui, passed away in 2019, and he wrote this poem called Lackawanna, and was published in the Pulitzer Prize winning book of poetry, The Carrier of Ladders, in 1970. And he makes a transition and I think a religious and spiritual reference to the Jordan at the end of the poem, River Jordan. Where you begin in me, I have never seen, but I believe it now, rising dark but clear. Later, when I lived where you went past, already you were black, moving under gases by red windows. Obedient child, I shrank from you. On girders of your bridges I ran, told to be afraid. Obedient, the arches never touched you, the running shadow never looked, the iron and black ice never stopped ringing underfoot. terror, a truth lived alone in the stained buildings, in the streets, a smoke, an eyelid, a clock. The black winter all year, like a dust melting and freezing in silence, you flowed from under, and through the night, the dead drifted down you, all the dead, and what was found later, no one could recognize. Told to be afraid, I awake black to the knees. So it has happened. I have set foot in you, both feet, Jordan. Too long I was ashamed at a distance. So I love this poem, I think to me it says what the river was like from his poetic perspective as a young man. His father was the rector of the Washburn Street Presbyterian Church. And this journey here, crossing the Lackawanna River on its bridges, I imagine this when I read it, that he's walking down Scranton Street when it went all the way down to the river, crossing the river at the Cliff Street Bridge by the gasworks below Steamtown, sending Cliff Street to Lackawanna Avenue, walking up Lackawanna Avenue, and you get the, I think the arches never touched you. I see that from the Cliff Street Bridge and some of the other bridges, the old iron bridges. In the streets of smoke, and I lit a clock. There was a optometrist and jewelry store in the, I think the 200 or 300 block of Lackawanna, Engels Optometry, and it had a neon sign with two eyelids. Anybody remember that? And then there was a neon tube around it that lit up, and it was a cast iron town clock in front of the store as well on the sidewalk, and then it was a cigar store, a door or two up with a cigar with a neon band around the cigar. So I just see that as a walk across town and across the river, you know, the contrast to Hollister's recollection of the river before, you know. So I think what we're doing now as a community is bringing it back to Hollister and knowing what's happening. Merwin was here for a reading in I think the late 70s or early 80s up at the Everhart Museum. The Friends of the Library brought him in. I had a chance to speak with them, and it was before I was involved with the LRCA. My good friend Craig Cherry was in communication with Merwin in the last 20 years or so, and Merwin was lamenting to him that the sad state that he recalled the Lackawanna, and Craig told him about our work here, and he was very interested in hearing more. And unfortunately, I had to start talking with Craig about that, and intended to reach out to him, but he passed in the meantime. But I think we have in our community the response to the place, and the variety of people who came from Horace Hollister to W.S. Merwin, to all the people from all the ethnicities who settled here and created a really rich cultural interchange of all of our cultures from Europe and Africa and Asia and in the native cultures as well. And I think that's still going on. We're a very creative space here. I think the land, you know, provides an inspiration to people in a creative way, in an artistic way, and I think that we need to be sensitive to that going forward, and how we continue to work to preserve what we have.
We're still working. We're still telling the story. Willis or Ted, anything else to wrap up?
No, I felt Bernie was eloquent in how can you top the poetry and so on, and I think he, thank goodness for his work and his organization that many of you, I'm sure, contribute to, and I think we haven't taken advantage of that river, because there are a lot of people come through Scranton or even in the Up Valley and never see the river. You know, I'm thinking, are there places where we could get a nice vista, a view of it. You know, we had that restaurant up on the Scranton-Carbondale Highway that gave us a view out over the valley. And I think I would always picture it. Coming out Mulberry Street every day like I did, driving home, I would think, gee, wouldn't it be nice if there were along the riverbanks, you know, businesses or restaurants that you could sit there and look out over the river and so on. And it is a shame we don't have anything like that. And of course, for many years, that you didn't want to go under the bridges and look around. And it was sad. And I think there's a lot of work to be done. A lot has already been done, I think, and thanks to Bernie and others, but in the city. But I think there's a lot more that can be done. And to enrich all of this and to tie it in with the history of the community.
Yeah, I have to agree that Lackawanna River Corridor Association is definitely doing what needs to be done with the river. I'm just in the middle of reading a book about the Susquehanna River, and almost every town they talk about in this book talks about how it got separated from the river and how the river's no longer part of the life of the people in the communities. Harrisburg being an exception because they have the park land right around across along the river. But what the trails are doing are bringing people back down to the river and getting them close to the river. There's so many areas that there's fill on the shore and some derelict buildings along there. If that can be cleaned up, beautified, I think we might be able to get Lackawanna River back into the lives of the people that live in Scranton and further down the line.
As we continue down the line. Very good. I think there's certainly still stories to be told. The mission of the Lackawanna Historical Society is to inspire exploration of the history of Lackawanna County. So as long as there's still stories to be told, still people working and living here and doing things, we'll continue to collect and explore those stories as we're going on for the next 145 years or however many, even after Mary Ann has left the Historical Society. We'll continue to keep collecting and telling those stories. So gentlemen, thank you again for joining us tonight, for sharing your knowledge and your experience and your opinions. I think we have a good foundation to go on to understand how we got here in this place. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight. I'm not sure if it's still raining out, but if it is, thank you again for joining us and safe travels on your way home. You got a thing?
I have one thing. Because I talked about the staff, and I was so excited to celebrate Sarah's 10 years. I forgot. I mentioned that they are the soul, and they're the heart of our organization is also here tonight. Gay Clifford and her daughter Sherry are the caretakers of the Catlin House. And I do want to recognize them for the beautiful work they do to keep our building looking so sharp. And I love you both, so thank you. And with that, we're going to close. So good night, everyone, and thank you so much for coming out to support this event.